Hello everybody, welcome back to another SUPboarder video. My name is Ruben and I'm going to talk you through today how to store your inflatable paddleboard. It's a very cold winter in the UK right now. I'm in our very messy shed. To be fair, it is a messy shed. But I'm going to talk to you about how you can store your inflatable paddleboard inflated and deflated and make sure you get the most out of it, so when you are getting back on the water, it's not covered in mold, it's not got twists in it, it's not maybe got some holes in it or any other things that could possibly happen over a longer period of rest. Now, a lot of the time it does obviously come down to space. If you want to store your inflatable paddleboard pumped up all the time, then you're going to need more space obviously than if you're just going to store it in the backpack or just rolled up. But the thing you have to do, whether you're going to be storing it inflated or deflated, is make sure it is dry when you store that iSUP. It doesn't necessarily need to be clean, but it needs to be dry. So you need to get rid of all of the salt if you're paddling in salt water, get rid of any of that sort of moisture before you store it away. Salt is really the big one here. If you're a freshwater paddler, it generally will dry out much quicker and much easier than a saltwater paddler. But still, even if you're on freshwater, make sure you dry it out properly first. So ideally, leave it outside on a sunny day, get the moisture out of it. Get it all out of the deck pad, get it all out around the fins, in the fin boxes, and also make sure the bag itself is nice and dry. If you don't do that and you roll up your inflatable paddleboard and you stick it in the corner for 2 months, it might end up looking like this. This is what happens if you leave your inflatable paddleboard with a salt layer and you just roll it up for the season. This has gone completely mouldy. Look at that. Now this is obviously not what you want. If this does happen, you can clean this quite well with a good PVC sort of boat cleaner and just getting it out fresh water, giving it a good scrub. There's another thing, a point I'll take out with this one, is you can see this board has actually been quite tightly rolled. It's actually not allowed air to get in there, so it's probably gone mouldy in between the gaps as well. So the first thing you can do is, when you are rolling it and you have cleaned and dried your board completely, try to give it a much looser roll as you roll it up, and that will let a bit of air get to it. There's an iSUP here stored next to it, and it's in much better, well, it's fine. There's no marks on it, there's no mold on it. It's rolled much looser. You might not look it, but it is rolled a bit looser, and it was completely dry when it was stored away, so that will make a big difference to the storage. Notice how these boards are stored without their bags. Now, it's a personal preference. I think it's a little bit better to store it without the bag. I generally, if I'm storing my iSUPs in a cold shed like this, I'll probably take the iSUPs, roll them up, clean out of the bags, and I'll take the bags and fold them up and put them in my house. So if you haven't got much space, you can take your bags and fold them up in your house. It's nice to have a nice clean dry bag and keep it a little bit warmer if you can throughout the colder months especially. Now, if you've got space in your house to keep your inflatable paddleboard probably not pumped up but rolled up in a bag, that will be better. Keeping it somewhere where the temperature stays, around the same all of the time is going to be much better at keeping your inflatable paddleboard in better condition, really reducing mold and mildew and stuff like that. A little tip when it comes to storing your fin boxes. This is obviously a very bad example of how your board shouldn't look, but good thing is you can see that the fin box is a big US box fin box, a plastic one. There's not much force just here. It's nice and flat, so it's sitting nice and comfortably along here, so you're not going to be straining the PVC here or the fin box itself. So if you've got a hard fixed fin box like this, and there's another one here, this is obviously inflated, but it's another hard fixed fin box, give the roll a little bit of space, let the fin box just sit comfortably. Don't put a lot of strain on these here when you're storing it for a long period of time. If you've got a board with fixed fins, like this one here, rubber built-in fins, you can be pretty harsh on them. You can roll them up quite tight. In the winter, they can take quite a lot of strain. They might come out the other end when you want to go paddling a little bit bent. And a bit deformed. If they are a little bit bent, don't worry, a little bit of heat from the sun, maybe a hairdryer at home, just a little bit of heat will straighten those fins out and they will regain their normal shape as they came out of the mold eventually. Other stuff you want to make sure you do when you're keeping your boards rolled up is don't put lots of stuff on top of them. Don't force creases into the boards with a lot of pressure. So don't roll this up super tight and then put 6 other boards or 10 mattresses or whatever stuff you got in your garage on top of it and squash the board down, because then the PVC is going to stay in that same shape the whole time, and that's where maybe cracks and weaknesses could occur across the rails of where the board is squashed together as well. So rinse it off, clean it off, give it a bit of air, make sure it's super dry, don't roll it too tight, give the fins some space, and then store it well in a dryish place if you can, and out of the bag is always best. Now when it comes to storing your inflatable SUP pumped up, if you've got enough space, this is a really good option of making sure you don't get any of the sort of moisture around the creases or the folds of the board. The board stays in good condition if you store it appropriately. The big no-no with inflatable paddle boards, to be honest, any time of year, is making sure that they're sitting nice and flat or on their edge, or if they are supported across a sort of a span, they're supported equally. So they're not sitting there diagonally getting a twist, because they potentially could get a twist, or they're not hanging off the back where they could potentially get a twist in time. So for instance, this board here, I've got stored alongside of our rack, because you know we do take this one out occasionally, but it hasn't been used for probably a month and a half. It's stored nice and vertically, and it's supported there and there, and to be honest, I've got some wetsuits actually that are supporting it at the back. So that is not going to get any twists in it at all over a longer period of time. If it was sort of out here like that, at a more of an angle, like that, then you know you might get a form of a twist in the center here where the PVC is starting to sort of relax and mold to the shape that's been given. Or if it's not supported by the end and it's sort of dangling out, it's supported back here but not there, it's going to form a twist and bend down like that. So that's the sort of stuff you really want to stay away from. You could also suspend your inflatable paddleboard pumped up against the ceiling. These obviously aren't iSUPs, these are old surfboards, but you could also do that. But if you are doing that, make sure that they're equally supported along the sort of the bottom or the upside down of the board. You want to make sure that it sits nice and flat. Some people will leave their boards, you know, straight up right on the tail, on the nose. You can do that as well. Make sure it's nice and flat. Hasn't got any option of being bending off in any way. And this point actually is really crucial if you're somewhere warm. If you live somewhere and your garage is always hot, so it's the opposite to this sort of in the winter. It's a hot garage, it's a hot storage location. That's even more important to make sure that that board sits there and it's well supported, because the heat will soften the PVC. It will allow the PVC to be more molded to the shape that you maybe put in the board by accident by leaning it up against something. So you can see here we've got our board rack, which is what we use for a load of different stuff. There's paddles there, there's buoyanciers, there's all sorts of stuff. And at the top of the board rack, we've got a few kids' boards. Now these are stored, I would say, the perfect way, apart from I can see there's a bit of moisture on here where Izzy obviously hasn't dried off our board. This board has got probably about 5 to 6 psi in it. And that one's got a bit more, that's got more like 9. So these boards are stored a longer period of time, a little bit of pressure, but not too much. The advantage of doing this is if you are living somewhere hotter or with more extreme temperatures from the evening or the day to the evening, the obviously iSUP could get much warmer, and it could, in effect, I have seen it in garages or heard about it in garages in places where they get really, really hot, they can actually explode. Not a very common case, but it can happen. So if you're going to be pumping your iSUP to 20 psi and you're somewhere really warm, and then you store it in your garage, which potentially can get even warmer, you are going to increase the pressure in that board as the temperature comes up. So for me, long periods in time, I would store it in a rack if you can, let the pressure out a little bit, and that way with the hot and cold temperatures, a change of pressure, the board's not going to be in any harm or any danger at all. This board down here, to be honest, needs a bit more air in it. It's actually going to form a crease here, it's probably going to have a little weakness here if it keeps on sitting like that, so that actually needs to have a bit more air in it to really make it the best. And you can see there's a bit of moisture on there as well, but because it's not rolled up, there's no mold or mildew on that at all, so it's actually looking pretty clean. And going on from that, some of you might even want to leave your iSUP outside in a rack. The sun will obviously damage your inflatable paddleboard, the deck pad of your paddleboard, or even the PVC of the paddleboard, so leave it in the shade if you can, but again, well supported, because that sun will affect the twist of the board if you allow it to twist. So that's just about it from me, from my very messy shed. Keep your iSUPs in mind, think about how they're going to be stored over the winter, make sure they're really dry when you store them off, and think about how that SUP is going to be sitting for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 months, 5, whatever sort of time span you're going to be thinking about. Inflatable paddleboards in general are very durable. We've stored them for many, many years and potentially not always in the best conditions, and they do still clean up and come out all right for the next following season. But definitely keeping your iSUP in good condition is a way to guarantee you are going to have a happier, safer paddle when you get on the water next time. Hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. Any comments and questions, as always, please let us know, and we'll see you on another SUPboarder video real soon.